Alright, so I kind of gave you an update in the previous video about what's happening in Afghanistan right now. But now I want to talk about some of the responses. So, predictably, basically, every politician in the US is out here feigning outrage and talking about, oh, the women and the children, we have to protect the women and the children, women's rights and all that. Um, they're doing that, and they're also many of them are making the excuse that we should never ever leave Afghanistan. Apparently, endless occupation. That's to be expected because the entire Congress is just in lockstep with the military-industrial complex. So that was gross to see, but to be expected. I mean, these people have been funding the war for the last 20 years unabated, and they would have funded it for the 20 years. And the war, again, as I mentioned in the previous video, war isn't continued. The war hasn't ended. But again, this is something that this conversation requires a lot of nuance because what is actually happening right now isn't what people are responding to. So, like I said, you have the warmongers acting like Biden just made a clean break and he's done with Afghanistan. He's ending the war and, like, he's locking up shop for good and he's never going to be involved in Afghanistan. They're acting like that's what he's doing, but it's really not. And they're mad about it because it's the occupation isn't what they prefer, isn't the occupation that they prefer. So they want it to be more to their liking. So that's what they're bitching about. And then you also have the people that, like some anti-war people on the left, who are giving Biden credit for getting out. And again, that's not what's actually happening. He's just making mouth noises and pretending like he's getting out. But he's talking out of both sides of his mouth, as he's been doing this entire time on this issue of Afghanistan. And saying, oh yeah, man, this war's been going on real long, super long war. We came for Bin Laden and Al Qaeda and all of those things are done now, so why are we still here? Paying all the lip service, almost as if his speechwriters have been watching lefty YouTube and paying lip service to the reasons, to some of the reasons, the most basic on face value, surface level reasons why we shouldn't be in Afghanistan. But then at the same time, like he did in that speech yesterday, talking about we're going to keep doing airstrikes and counter-terrorism missions. Okay, so isn't that kind of exactly what you've been doing this entire time? So you're just going to keep doing that in Afghanistan. So again, nobody's like actually responding to what Biden is doing. It's more of the rhetoric and some of the flailing about that they were responding. And so, like I said, this is an interesting conversation because people are acting like, oh, we give Biden credit or we give him blame for what's happening in Afghanistan right now. And I think that's an interesting conversation because, like I said, most people are, the people blaming him are blaming him for leaving or pretending like he's leaving. And then the people giving him credit are giving him credit for something that he's also not doing. So my take is different from both of these camps, all those different camps. And I'm not giving him an ounce of fucking credit on this. As I mentioned when I was on the Convo Couch recently and it was on Nico House's show, I'm not giving him any fucking credit for this because you started the fire, and I'm not giving you credit if you put it out. And again, by the way, he's not putting it out. He's just pretending like he's putting the fire out. So either way, I'm not giving him credit for that. But then it does, like, open up a theoretical debate or question about, even let's say he did get out, would you give him credit? No, I still wouldn't give him credit. For the reason that I stated before, you started the fire. And as we learned in Afghanistan papers, he's known that this has been a giant clusterfuck from the beginning when he lied the country into the war, helped lie us into the war in the first place back in 2000. So he knew it was bullshit, and for 20 years he came out and lied to the publicly, systemically lied to the public with all the generals and the people from the State Department and everybody else in the White House, Obama, and all the other presidents who presided over this war. They all, on purpose, the entire time of this war, came out, manipulated the data, lied about the civilian casualties, lied about the massacres and the genocides that were occurring at our hands in Afghanistan, the reckless bombing of civilians and hospitals and infrastructure, all those things. Lied about all of those things so that we could continue, so that we could stay in that war and continue feeding the war machine and let the military-industrial complex profit endlessly off of the war. That's the type of heinous shit that Joe Biden has allowed to go on in Afghanistan unabated for the last 20 years. So if he wakes up one day and says, okay, we're going to end the war now, I'm still not giving you any fucking credit. And another reason why I'm not giving him credit, because by his own words, they're still going to be doing airstrikes there. So he's not ending anything. He's just playing around with phrasing. But also, they're doing like this giant troop reshuffle, and they're just moving troops from Afghanistan and lessening the actual numbers of troops and physical forces in Afghanistan so that they could increase it in other countries like Somalia and other countries in Africa, or maybe in Syria. So, like, all we're doing, like, people have to understand, like, these are not isolated things. What's happening in Afghanistan is related to what's happening in Iraq, what's related to what's happening in Syria, Yemen, and Somalia and the rest of Africa, Libya, and all of them. This whole war on terror is this, that's the cancer here. That's the problem. That's the core fundamental issue with this latest version of U.S. imperialism, this and our foreign policy. So I'm not giving you credit for shuffling troops in one country from one country to another country so you can continue to do more reckless murdering of civilians and genocide for the profit of the military-industrial complex. That's the heinous crime that's being committed here. That's the crime against humanity, that we're funding these endless wars and using our unmatched military might to occupy other countries. That's the rub. So doing it slightly less in Afghanistan does not merit me throwing a fucking parade and acting like you're this big anti-war hero, because you're not. And I need people to stop acting like that, because it's really fucking gross. And also, yes, Joe Biden deserves blame for not just like the chaotic way he pulled out, which he does deserve some blame for because it was sloppy as all hell. But also, this is just what was going to happen when, from his 20 years of involvement in this war. And when we were propping up this sham government, inevitably, if any president left, it would have been chaos. Because there was no legitimate functioning government. But ultimately, he deserves blame for all of this because of his role in starting this war and continuing this war for 20 years. And so, before everybody's throwing Joe Biden a fucking parade and carving his face into Mount Rushmore for we still don't know truly what's happening. It's just seismic events, seismic shifts happening in Afghanistan. We don't know exactly how this is going to play out and what our role is going to be. Because at this moment, now there about to be more troops in Afghanistan than there were 3 months ago. So when he sends those 6,000 troops in to secure the airport. So what happens after that? Who knows? And how many are going to stay? How many covert ops? Are there still going to be airstrikes? Who knows? But what? So again, you should really pause on giving him credit for anything. But what we should be doing, anybody who considers himself anti-imperialist, anti-interventionist, anti-war activist, we should be capitalizing on this moment where everybody is focusing on Afghanistan and really try to shed some light on what's happened over the last 20 years and how fucked up this whole thing was, how intentional this whole thing was, and how it was one massive war crime after the next, and was intentionally covered up by the government to keep this thing going on, this gravy train going on as long as possible. And somebody needs to answer for that, because there was a lot of civilian casualties. Hundreds of thousands of people are dead, millions of people displaced, their country destroyed, infrastructure ruined, no stable government to be found, and again, natural resources hijacked, stolen by Western corporations. So all of these things are war crimes, punishable by life in prison. And like people like Kyle Kalinske, Crystal Ball, and everybody else celebrating this, they're acting as if nobody, like, there shouldn't be any accountability for Joe Biden and all the Lloyd Austin and Anthony Blinken and all the other war profiteers that he has in his cabinet, as if like they shouldn't be held responsible for the shit that they've done in Afghanistan over the last 20 years. In the sane world, and it is completely inexcusable that this hasn't happened yet, but the Justice Democrats and Bernie Sanders should be holding hearings on the Afghanistan war, and they should have been doing it about the Afghanistan papers, because those things were a damning indictment of the war and should have ended the war by itself. That's how serious those what we learned from those interviews were. And so everybody in the Biden administration should have to answer for their role over the last 20 years and their role in the current Biden administration, including Biden himself, and get to the bottom of this. And because all of this shit is impeachable, by the way. So again, if they were serious about challenging the establishment, the Democratic leadership, and taking wins where they can, this is a massive opportunity to hammer Joe Biden on his war profiteering and aiding and abetting the genocide for profit of innocent Afghanis, and then covering up all these casualties, the systemic, the lengths that they went to hide what was actually happening from the public. And a great example of that is what's happening to Julian Assange right now, being persecuted, locked up, life ruined for the last 10 years because he published the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs given to him by Chelsea Manning. And that was really the first look that we had inside these wars. And we see the rampant murders and war crimes and cover-ups and all those things going on. And the journalist who exposed it is sitting in prison. And Joe Biden is actively trying to prosecute that person. So all these things need to be answered for. And somebody should be in fucking prison. Somebody should be in fucking... They raided the treasury of trillions of dollars to these no-bid contracts to these defense contractors to prop up this corrupt kleptocracy, fake sham government in Afghanistan. All of this shit, somebody needs to answer for it. And do not make the mistake of when the, Obama talking about we're looking forward, we're not looking backwards. No, this shit needs to stop. And it's not just happening in Afghanistan, it's happening all over the world. And for once, the war criminals, they should not be allowed to get away with it. And we need to draw a line in the sand and say this shit is not acceptable anymore. And the violating the sovereignty of Afghans, the rampant murder and genocide of the population, all that is enough to draw outrage and for us to draw the line in the sand, but also this militarism is destroying the planet. Yes, the bombs destroyed these cities and these countries that we're attacking, but our military is the number one producer of carbon emissions. They're the number one polluter on the fucking planet. So as we're mid-climate apocalypse, we are continuing these wars unabated and continuing to exacerbate the climate crisis as well as these humanitarian crises around the world. And it just needs to stop. It needs to stop, or we're literally going our imperialism is going to cause the extinction of the entire human race. Not just because the bombs and the destabilization, but the effects that it's having on the climate. So, again, that was all to say that somebody needs to fucking answer for this. This isn't just like, oh, whoops, my bad. We carried out the longest war in U.S. history under false pretenses the entire time and committed war crimes all the way through it. But now we don't feel like talking about it anymore, so we're going to say the war's over and everybody look over there and we're not going to talk about this anymore. No, this should still be the topic of discussion for years to come until all these people are in fucking prison.